Live in Studio West, where the wind is howling and will continue to howl. If you're just waking up on the East Coast, be very assured you have no idea what it's like in Southern California. You may turn on a feed, but you have no idea because you can't hear the wind. It's at both studio, our production studio, and the studio from which I broadcast, and the wind is gusting, I would guess, 70 miles an hour at times. Pretty regular gust at 40 miles per hour. And we can see pictures at night of LA burning. By that I mean there are three separate fires, one in Sylmar, one in Pasadena, and one in Pacific Palisades. And if I can draw you a little map in your mind, start at Malibu. If you know where Malibu is, it's the beach to the stars just north of Santa Monica. And put a fire on the top of Malibu in your mind, and then move directly east all the way over to Pasadena as though you were driving on I guess that would be the 101. And in between, if you took a left turn and drove up 30 minutes, you get to Sylmar. So you've got a kind of inverted T of three major fires. There are smaller fires in Southern California tonight. None in Orange County, where I live, work, broadcast, teach, yet. But it's a long 12 hours ahead. More than 50,000 people have had to flee their homes. Hundreds of homes have been burned to the ground. They are out of water in Pacific Palisades, where the first fire began. The water pressure has failed. There's no water. And the fires are 0% contained, which is always the worst of the conditions, I can tell you. And there's not much I can add to other than if you take a look at, if you're watching on the Salem News Channel, and it might be a good morning to do that, you'll see the Palisades, Altadena, Pasadena, and Sylmar fires, a fourth one now in Altadena. The Eaton fire, the Pacific Palisades, they get funny names. I don't know who makes up the names, but it's a very bad morning. My phones are open, 1-800-520-1234. If you're near the perimeter of the fire, give me a call and just tell me what it looks like. 1-800-520-1234. I cannot see. I'm in Orange County. I'm an hour away. Everybody's safe. I have no idea how my friends are doing up there. I did talk to my dear friend Len and Judy last night, offered to say, hey, you want me to come over and pick you up? And they were going somewhere else, and they were getting out. That's really what I wanted to know, is that they're in Mandible Canyon, and we love going to their home, and we always think about, what the heck do you do if you have to get out of here? Because you got to drive down. These canyons are unbelievable. Los Angeles is a pathway evolution exhibit A. Pathway evolution is that which happens because something just a little bit different happened before that, which just a little bit different happened before that. So the infrastructure in Southern California is simply not equipped. So think East Palestine times 10, maybe times 100, and there is only bravery from the Los Angeles Fire Department, Police Department, by the reciprocal resource aid agreements that exist. So basically every firefighter who can be found in Southern California, and many from Las Vegas, have come to the scene of this disaster. I've seen big fires before. I was not, I consider Northern California is not really Southern California. The Berkeley fire many years ago that destroyed 300 homes, that is we're going to have something at least as big as that when the sun comes up. The Laguna Beach fire, which I could see from my home in the middle of Orange County, destroyed hundreds of homes. That I can remember. I've had to pack up twice over 30 years. This is not a normal event. Fire season is normal. Lots of fires happen where people aren't. Very few fires happen where this began. Way close. The trouble was just way close on a Santa Ana day. And the El Diablo, the devil winds, the Santa Ana winds are blowing. Those are winds that blow, for the benefit of the Steelers fans, from the east to the west, not from the west to the east, which is typical. And when you see the airplanes landing in the opposite direction, I live close enough, I can see John Wayne Airport. Whenever I see them coming in from over the ocean as opposed to from over the continent, you realize the winds are pretty bad. And the Santa Anas are a regular feature of life. This is not something we weren't ready for. We were obviously not ready for it. We being collective. I'm not blaming Gavin Newsom. You can't do anything. Literally, you can't do anything to prevent. If you're going to live in California, you're going to deal with this every 10 years. And you're going to pack your car a few times. You're going to pray that you don't. My friend Leslie Marshall has lost her car. And Leslie and I have done special report with her home, not her car. What am I saying? Leslie Marshall, pretty certain she's lost her home. And, Leslie and I have known each other and worked with each other for 25 years. She's been wrong for 25 years, but a wonderful person. And so prayers for Leslie. She just posted a quick picture. We think we've lost our home. And it is zombie apocalypse now. The fire started middle of the afternoon yesterday when the winds had begun to pick up. Started out as a 20-acre brush fire. No containment units are rushing to the scene. Then you begin to listen because that's pretty close to Pacific Palisades. Pacific Palisades may be the most beautiful neighborhood in America. And I know some people love Malibu, but there are not many people living in Malibu. Malibu is one street. Malibu is just the Pacific Coast Highway on both sides of it. A couple of side streets, and there will be some people who lose their homes on those side streets. I'm not indifferent to that. But the Pacific Palisades is a big, giant neighborhood with a high school and lots of elementary schools. And it won't be there in the morning. It is 3 o'clock in the morning right now when I'm talking to you. And it's just tragic. So it started in the middle of the day. So hopefully children are at school. Children are quickly seen off and taken to collection centers. They're not driven home. Mass casualty event at Duke's, and I've eaten at Duke's dozens of times, as everyone in Southern California is listening to me, who goes out and drives up to Santa Barbara, you go by Duke's, and that's apparently the site of a mass casualty event. But I'm not going to report rumor. I'm just going to tell you I've never seen anything like this. 1-800-520-1234. 1-800-520-1234. What hurricanes are to Florida, fires are to California. Earthquakes are different. Earthquakes are unpredictable events that are known to almost certainly going to happen. So you build an anticipation of them. Fires are ubiquitous in Southern California. I'm looking at another picture watching on your screen right now. And it's extraordinary because wind-driven firestorms I've only seen one since I moved back in 1989. I left in 2016. I come back to teach in the spring every other year at Chapman Law School. I'll teach dozens of students con law, and I'm the originalist of the originalists left, so I don't want to not do that. So I'm back every spring for 3.5 months and teaching and listening and watching, but I have never seen anything like this. And by that I mean this much fire for this long. I've seen big fires in a residential area. I want to make that clear. Not just a residential area. The Palisades where Arnold lived. The Palisades is where everybody lives. I mean, some stars live in the Hollywood Hills. Some celebrities live in Studio City. But if you go from Pasadena, you drive the 101 from Pasadena to Pacific Palisades, you've gone by 85% of the people that you see at the award ceremonies. And they are all just like everybody else this morning, at the mercy of Mother Nature and seeking the mercy of the gracious God that nobody gets hurt. It's memories, it's houses, it's tragic. There's only one person in my family who's gone through a house fire, fetching Mrs. Hewitt's first cousin. And it was pretty tragic. It's a very hard thing to do, to lose a house that you've lived in for any amount of time. But they weren't hurt, and they didn't lose their pets. A lot of people realized that they left their pets at home yesterday when they went to work. They never got back home. I don't know where people were. Everyone was staying at different places last night. They were just, you can't do anything. You can't get into the area. But it's simply unprecedented. And we'll figure out where the best place to send help. I know Americans are generous. We'll find out who can do that, whether it's Food for the Poor or somebody. You can always count on Catholic Charities or Salvation Army, but it's a wicked morning in Southern California, early morning. My phone number is 1-800-520-1234, 1-800-520-1234. If you're anywhere near the fire, give me a call. If you're just watching it at home, give me a call. Let me give you a report from, I believe this is KCAL Channel 9. There are a couple of great independent stations out here, KCAL Channel 9, KTLA Channel 5. KCAL Channel 9 last night on the fire headed towards Santa Clarita from Sylmar, cut number 24.
This fire is not even like 30 minutes old at this point, and this is already the situation that we're looking at. Look at John pans around to the hillside. So if you're familiar with that area, they got the 210 freeway, which, by the way, is closed because of the fire, because of smoke that was shooting off of the freeway, or over the freeway there. And you have Olive View Medical Center. If you know where Olive View Medical Center is, in the Sylmar area to the north side of the 210 freeway, this is burning above that. John is in a home off of, I think, Circle Diamond Road that is north of the 210. He's off a home that's off of Yarnell. Thank you, John.
That's Santa Clarita. Let's now go over and check with Channel 5, Carlos Saucedo. Good reporter, by the way. They have great television reporters in L.A., obviously, stepping stone to the East Coast big markets. Cut number 22.
There we are in the 800 block of Radcliffe Avenue in Pacific Palisades. It is still an inferno out here. You can see just how strong the flames. Oh! Whoa! And you heard that explosion there.
Things are blowing up as they hit barbecues, gas tank, things like that. Michelle Frazier on ABC News, cut number 21. A building collapses over her shoulder as you're watching.
And the devastation that has been wrought on that community is huge. The fire crossing all the way into PCH and beyond, burning all the way to the ocean at this point. Where are you? You're on PCH now, Michelle?
You're watching an enormous building just fell down behind her. All right, let me give you a couple of clips. Rick Caruso ran for mayor. He lost to Karen, what's her last name? Bass.
Karen Bass.
And Karen Bass is not going to win the spelling bee. Rick Caruso, chairman of USC, developer, really smart guy. He's beside himself. Cut number 19 on Fox Channel.
My heart goes out,
11.
obviously, to the people with their homes, and I'm watching the small businesses around us go up in flames. This is people's livelihoods, so it's devastating. But what is most concerning to me is our first responders and our firefighters who are trying to battle this. There's no water in the Palisades. There's no water coming out of the fire hydrants. This is an absolute mismanagement by the city. It's not the firefighters' fault, it's by the city.
Yeah, you're really screwed. The planes can't fly at night. They can't do the water drops. There are 3 black dots on. Black dots are the worst. It means the fire is growing overnight when they can't see anything. So we'll keep you posted as we can. I got my relief factor. Don't know if I'm going up the Implacable Hill this morning because the air quality will be awful. I did do it yesterday morning after the program, and even then it was weird because it was supposed to be a clear day, but the Santa Ana's made it cloudy and there was some drizzle involved and it was just windy as could be, and you get the allergy. But Relief Factor does nothing for your allergy. You don't feel sore when you take it, like I do on air every morning because I carry in curcumin resveratrol omega. Comes in handy whether you're climbing the Implacable Hill or running for your literal life, as many people had to do, abandoning cars and homes last night in Pacific Palisades. Relief Factor, the studio is fine, although you might be able to hear the wind blowing. I am here to tell you, you don't want to have to ever sprint from a fire. You don't want to have to sprint anywhere you don't intend to run, but you're going to get banged up by life. Relief Factor helps with the minor aches and pains. And call 1-800, the number 4, and the word relief. 1-800, the number 4, RELIEF. Or go to their website, find the starter pack for $19.95. Do what I do. Take it every single morning. ReliefFactor.com, ReliefFactor.com. Every single morning. Or afternoon. I am moving to the afternoon next week. I want my listeners in New England especially to know I will miss you in the morning in WGN in Portland and Atlanta 920, New Hampshire, Washington, D.C. But I'll be here in the afternoons on most of these stations, driving you home, telling you what happened during the day. And on mornings like this, when it's dark in the west and you can't really tell anything, I'm glad to be moving back to the afternoon so that I can wrap up for you the news of the day. Matt Continetti is coming up. I'm going to cover Donald Trump's press conference. I'll continue to break live news as we can see, but until the sun comes up, which is hours away in Southern California, we won't really know. And when we see it, it's going to be as bad as anything you have ever seen in the United States. It's that widespread. The winds are that, and now the water system has failed. Electricity also out in a lot of northern Los Angeles. Hope it hasn't gone up into Ventura County by the time the sun comes up. Southern California out in Studio West, which is on fire. I'm joined by Matt Continetti. He is with American Enterprise Institute, the Commentary Podcast, a Washington Free Beacon columnist as well. Good morning, Matt. You are a Beltway boy, born and bred. You're raising your own family there now. When you look out here, where I've been living since 1989, I'm back for a few months to teach a class, and you see it on fire. What do you think?
Well, Hugh, good morning. The first thing I think is how awful these images are. Pretty historic devastation, it seems to me. The second thing I think is that it's a terrible reminder of the power of nature. We often think that we're in control of nature, and we see winds like this, 99 miles per hour gusts, and the fire, and we see that at the end of the day, we're not in control of nature. And the third thing I think is we have to take a look, once the fire is combated and abated, at what had led to this devastation beyond that awesome power of nature. And I do think we're picking up signs already of just epic mismanagement by the California and Los Angeles governments, whether that is in forest management, which sometimes leads to the spread of these fires, or now with the news that there is no water available to the firefighters in the Palisades. What is going on with water? Of course, always a big issue in California and in Los Angeles. So a lot of reactions now, but my first reaction, of course, is emotional and for the families affected.
Now, there are going to be thousands of structures gone, maybe thousands of homes, certainly hundreds of homes. I haven't heard of any fatalities yet, but I'll keep watching. I want to read to you my friend, Ambassador Rick Grinnell. I don't know if you know him or not. Lives in Redondo Beach half of the year and writes, the national media hasn't even mentioned that Karen Bass is in Africa. She's the mayor of Los Angeles. While our city is literally burning to the ground, Dr. Pat Soon Chlong is trying to protect her. He hired an East Coast Republican to write for the op-ed page. He thinks that is enough to fix the LA Times, but it is woke newspaper that has given people like Karen Bass the aid and comfort they need to ignore the common sense water and forest policies. That's sort of the leading edge of the aftermath. And the fire's still, we're not going to be done for 24 hours, given what the weather report is out here, Matt. But I think you're going to see a lot more of this throughout the day. In fact, let me play for you. This is Rick Caruso, who lost to Karen Bass in the mayoral race in the last cycle, cut number 19.
Honest, we've got a mayor that's out of the country, and we've got a city that's burning, and there's no resources to put out fires. So if you look at your pictures, you don't see the firefighters there because there's nothing they can do. And it looks like we're in a third world country here. Mm-hmm. And we've got a lot of tough questions that we need to ask the mayor and the city council and our representatives and the county representatives. Why didn't you work to mitigate this? What was your brush mitigation program? I heard you earlier talking about it's been dry because there hasn't been rain. That's not the biggest problem here. The brush up in these hills that are controlled by the city and the county, I would bet you that if they haven't been handled, mitigated, pruned, removed for probably 30 or 40 years. This was a disaster waiting to happen.
All right, so Matt, this is going to go on all day because it is a failure of infrastructure as well as Mother Nature has been particularly grim this morning with wind gusts up to 90 miles per hour in Orange County. We're not on fire in Orange County, but boy, LA is.
Yeah. And, what Rick Caruso was talking about with the brush management, we have to remember that this is often the consequence of green policies in the environmental lobby that say that don't touch the brush, don't touch the forests. And what that does lead to are incredible fires and this quick spread of fires like we are seeing right now. One other point about this, Hugh, you're right, I'm not a Californian other than a frequent visitor and just a lover of California's scenery and culture. But there, tragedies like this, disasters like this, often have unpredictable political consequences too. And when you think about some of the political effects of Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans in 2005, which led to kind of the breaking of the Democratic monopoly in Louisiana, I wonder whether something of this magnitude might not have a similar effect. We're already seeing California's politics take a different turn than what we're used to, especially at the local level. And the reaction to the soft on crime policies of the previous LA prosecutor, as you like to say. And I wonder whether this might just be another piece of evidence for most Californians that the style of governance they've had for the past generation has just not produced very good results at all.
I think that conversation is going to go on at very high decibel levels because it hit the wrong place for politicians. It hit the most wealthy corner of Los Angeles County when you talk about the Palisades in Malibu. The other two fires in Sylmar and Pasadena are getting underway in very developed lands as well. Thus far, nothing in Orange County, San Diego County to speak of, but I'll keep you posted, Southern California, as we go through this. Matt, you weren't on the commentary podcast yesterday. They were talking about the changes that have been made at Meta. I'm going to have Joel Kaplan on, who is the new head of international affairs for Meta, replacing Nick Clegg this week, later in the program. What is your reaction to that? Because this morning, I assure you, people are zooming over to Facebook and X because old media is too slow. They are looking on Xbook and on X and Meta to find out if their house is burned down or their friend's house is burned down. What do you think of Zuckerberg's policy announcement yesterday?
Well, I think it's the right policy. I think that it's part of a general cultural thaw, an American glasnost, if you will, that has settled in this country since the election. An opening up, people willing to allow free speech, which you would think they would do already. But this has been the situation the past several years. We haven't had free speech in many important institutions. So it was good that Mark Zuckerberg did this. And I think that in his statement, he contained a very important phrase. He said the election was a cultural tipping point. And I really do agree with that. Now, it raises the question, why did it take the election to lead to more speech on Facebook? Why did it take Elon Musk purchasing Twitter, now X, to lead to more free speech on that platform? But whatever the reasons, I think we can say that these are good things, and we should want more of it. And I think it's just one more kind of cultural benefit of Trump's election that we're seeing even before he takes office in 2 weeks.
Matt, I like that term. You should copyright American Glasnost. I will quote you when I talk to Joel later in the hour or in the program. I am curious if you think, as I do, that the announcement reflects the reassertion of the American genome into our culture. The American genome is what's deep in our bones, and it's frontier factories and farm and faith. And therefore, the perceived cultural elite got no connection with any of that. And their American glasnost is necessary because for a time they were trying to suppress the American DNA, which you really can't do. We say what's on our mind, and we say it loudly and often. I often do it because I'm regulated by the FCC without vulgarity every day. It can be done, but online you can be vulgar. What do you think? Is it in our DNA? This just will not work to attempt to censor Americans.
No, I agree with that. There's something about American individualism, American speech. We don't like being told what to do. We don't really have a deferential attitude toward authority. Anyone who studies our history can see that, and that's what's made the past 4 years so unusual. And I think you can even go back a little bit toward the beginning of the Obama era as the source of many of these restrictions on free speech, the source of many of this radically politically correct policies that made people afraid to say what they think. I mean, we've seen that come out in polls as well. So it's an unalloyed good that we're now having an opening up, that we're having more expression. And that's what I think the 2024 election, Hugh, when we look at it in historical terms, may end up being much more important than just another election. Obviously, there's the realignment of some voting groups, in particular Hispanic Americans, moving toward the GOP, like previous waves of immigrants have in the past, that's important. But then there's this larger kind of, cultural dimension. The cliche is to call it a vibe shift now. Whatever you want to call it, I do think people have more of a spring in their step. They're excited. They want to speak their mind. They want to be true to their natures as Americans. And this is a positive and I hope long-lasting development.
New York and Los Angeles are blue cities, and they both have their own kind of crises right now. One is public safety in New York. One is the inability to contain very predictable fire events on the West Coast. But I don't think it makes a dent in the politics of either place because our memory is so short, Matt. Let me go and ask you, do you think politics in America is changing in any kind of lasting way, or are we just red and blue with red being temporarily ascendant?
We are red and blue. This is a generational pattern. But I will say this, Hugh, the blue does not really know what hit it in the 2024 election. And when you look at a lot of Democrats and a lot of liberals right now, they have still not come to terms with the fact that their cultural views are far out of step with most Americans. And until they align their cultural views with the cultural sentiments of the majority of this country, I think the Democrats, no matter where they are, liberal Democrats will be in electoral trouble.
Matt, I'm going to hold you to the break so I can play it next hour, but I want to give you a homework assignment while we set up the break. I'm finishing a column for Fox News that will run tomorrow that talks about the rhetorical agenda for Donald Trump. His legislative agenda is known and being debated right now between one bill and two bill or three bills, et cetera. But the rhetorical agenda, he's got 5 events coming up. The 250th anniversary of Lexington and Concord, which is in April, the 250th anniversary of our Declaration of Independence. He's got the World Cup coming to the United States in 2026. He has the 25th anniversary of 9/11 coming up next year, which will be one of the most somber anniversaries I've gone through. And then he will welcome the world to Los Angeles in 2028. My question, and we can get started, and I'll tell you when we go to break, do you think he is at all prepared? Do you think they have rhetoricians that are going to seize this opportunity to kind of redefine America in the new century?
Oh, I do think he has the resources available. I mean, his speechwriter, Vince Haley, who will be in charge of domestic policy in the second administration, is a very talented wordsmith. Stephen Miller, of course, got his start as a speechwriter as well. Donald Trump has forged a new means of communication that clearly connects with millions of people. The resources are there, Hugh, and I think they're going to be up to the demands of this very important moment, as you said.
These 5 moments, these anniversaries that are coming up, and what rhetorical points Trump can make. Because if we are indeed at a rebuke of the far left, if that's what's happened, it should be articulated and packaged the right way. What would you advise his speechwriting staff, or have he hired McConnell and Scully or any of the other shops in D.C., which are really great wordsmiths? What themes do you think they ought to hit? I have my own set, but what do you think?
Well, I would just start, Hugh, by going back to some of the speeches Trump made in his first term. I think his speech to the people of Poland in 2017, I think his speech in front of Mount Rushmore in 2020, I think elements of his farewell address, actually, where he talked about the achievements of his first term and the American spirit. So I would go back to those speeches, and then I try to distill the message of them and then pour that message into what he's going to talk about, whether it is Lexington and Concord coming up or America's declaration at 250 in next year in 2026. And what I think, the message of Donald Trump's most important speeches is America is a nation. A nation has borders, but a nation also has a certain spirit. And the American spirit is energetic, can-do, individualistic, and always reaching for the stars. And I expect him to voice similar themes in his speeches in the coming 4 years.
If I were king of the forest, I would get us away from the American century and talk about the American millennium, that we are not going anywhere and we are not going to be usurped. I don't know that he'll do anything that way, but I do believe that all this stuff about Greenland, the Panama Canal, Canada, the Gulf of America. These are all Trump's initial salvos in the American millennium is on us, not the American century ending. Last word to you, Matt. Do you think he's trying to evidence that kind of a mindset?
I think you're beginning to see some of it when President-elect Trump talks about America's golden age. He mentioned that again at his press conference yesterday in Florida, and I think it will be the theme of his second inaugural address, that after 2024, America will enter a golden age of economic development, creativity, and it seems clear from listening to Donald Trump, territorial expansion as well.
Do you believe him when he tells me that the Navy is going to grow and back to what it was? Because I really did spend most of my interview on Monday talking about the Navy with him.
It was a great interview, and I hope he does go and continue to expand the Navy like he pledged to, Hugh. We're beginning to see some signs that the Senate Republicans do want to plus up defense. And that's necessary, especially in a world where, even as we go into this American golden age, there are still real threats, whether it's China, Russia, or Iran. So we need a strong military, and in order to deter those threats, and in order to avoid wars, avoid having to use the military, you avoid it by having an extremely well-funded and extremely qualitatively, technologically adept military force.
Ships, submarines, submersibles, satellites, and cyber. We need all those things and a lot of them. Matt Continetti, always good to talk with you. I look forward to talking to you in the afternoon at a really civilized hour beginning next week when I move to the afternoon drive and the noontime drive out west. Don't go anywhere, America. I'll be right back. Joined by Mary Catherine Ham, who's on the East Coast. I'm on the West Coast. Mary Catherine, good morning. You know where I live. You know where we live. You've been guest in our home. And, yeah, we keep an eye on the hills, but we are an hour south of this nightmare. I'm just hoping for the people up there that they got out alive. What are your thoughts as you watch this unfold? You're muted, Mary Catherine, so we're going to have to go back and get your initial... you have that face on that I had yesterday. Martha McCollum's team just could not get me to make my machine work yesterday. They were pretty frustrated with me. But that sometimes happens when worlds collide. Yeah, we're going to have to re-up that. Let me, in the meantime, read to you Rick Grinnell last night. These SoCal fires are preventable. The far lefties controlling Sacramento have left us with forest policies that are dangerous, limited water resources to respond properly. We live on an ocean, but we are told to stop watering our lawns and take quick showers. We didn't capture the rain properly. It just runs back into the ocean. We bob from mudslides during the rainy season to forest fires with limited water resources. Stop voting for these woke people. We deserve better leadership in California. I don't know whether or not people will actually hang on to their anger. This is not what happened after Berkeley burned to the ground 20 years ago. An entire neighborhood in the Berkeley Hills was destroyed. And it was a neighborhood of lefty academics. It was a very wonderful neighborhood. That's what the Palisades are going to look like, and maybe Sylmar and maybe parts of Pasadena when we wake up this morning. But it's really all a response. So Mary Catherine is back. Mary Catherine, your thoughts on looking at the pictures this morning?
Yeah, I mean, it's scary and tragic, and I know how fast fire can move, especially given the wind forecast that didn't look good last night. I worry about just people in their homes, obviously, and that hope that as many people as possible got out safely. I also worry about response, because there, unfortunately, in large cities are not a lot of places where you have an emergency response situation like you have in Florida that's very competent and thought through. And it worries me what is in place, even though the emergency and first responder folks are working super, super hard and in dangerous conditions to get this done. Being in a place like LA, I would be concerned about what's available.
Water pressure has failed in Pacific Palisades. I don't know if you're familiar with that neighborhood, Mary Catherine. It's where Arnold lives, where many of the celebrities of Hollywood fame live, and those houses are all going to burn down because the water has failed. What do you think if you're a homeowner and the water hydrants didn't work?
I mean, I saw something just this morning looking through saying we're trying to call emergency services about something that's posing a threat that's less than the fire, right? But it was like sparking wires that are going to start another fire, and they can't get a response. And they said the city's failing us. And look, there's been a lot of data points on this. I think my friend Kristen Soltis Anderson wrote in the New York Times that when people have distrust in institutions, a lot of the press treats it as if it's the problem with the people, when in fact it's the record of the institutions. So that's what concerns me, not the people on the ground doing really hard work on behalf of citizens, because there are many of those. But if you have an infrastructure and a process and a government that has been focused on other things and not building up these muscles, you have trouble in these situations.
I want everyone to turn off anyone who brings up the phrase wildlife-urban interface. It's just nonsense. California's been this way for as long as I've lived here, which is back to 1978, which is we get big fires. Everything is imminently foreseeable. The Santa Anas don't surprise anyone. So if the infrastructure is not there, there's a political failure. So, Mary Catherine, we have in New York a public safety failure. People are afraid to get on the subways. In Chicago, we have a schools failure. They just have collapsed. I think that's actually charitable. And in LA, we have a safety services shortage. The firefighters are very brave. The police are out there. They're doing their jobs, and the water has failed. What happens politically? Does anyone recognize these are basic things for governance?
I think that there is a backlash sort of happening as we speak. Unfortunately, it's been too late to fix the problems. Chicago, in particular, is mystifying how they went for Brandon Johnson when they had a chance to do something else. And as soon as that happened, suddenly Brandon Johnson is down to like 12% approval because of what has happened in Chicago since then. I think there's a backlash in action that is unfortunately too late to fix the current problems. And the problem with having been so invested in governance that's like very involved in things that are not the basics. And yeah, I mean DEI in part, but I mean a lot of other stuff too. So like paying off constituencies or nonprofit groups that are left of center and being involved in that ideology instead of being involved in serving citizens and doing the boring basics, which will save lives. It's hard to dig out of that. It's hard to create a culture that serves people competently when you have abandoned that for a long period of time. And I do think people are just going to start moving. I was mystified in 2020, post 2020, when they wouldn't let people come back to work in DC, when they kept COVID rules so long. I was like, these cities are committing suicide. This is not a place that anyone wants to pay this amount of money to live in.
The fiscal effect, the fiscal impact of this fire is going to be unbelievable because the people who are burnt out are going to leave the state. They're not going to rebuild here. They're going to go to Texas or someplace else. The meta reform movement, what Matt Continetti called to me, Mary Catherine, an American glasnost. How did you react to the Zuckerberg announcement yesterday?
To me, it's obviously good news, right? And some people are complaining like, oh, this is him buttering up Trump. Well, if the way that you're buttering up Trump is to do less censorship, then great. We all win. The way to butter up Biden and get on his side was explicitly to censor the American people, particularly during an emergency situation in COVID. So I'm all for it. If you look back at Zuckerberg's, and I'm less cynical about him than others are, I think people who are the head of these companies have a really hard job with content moderation. It is not simple to do this job. However, if you look back at his 2019 speech at Georgetown, his gut seems to be in the right place on freedom of speech. Now, directly after that, COVID happened, and Meta did not come through in sticking up for Americans and their right to free speech in many ways there. And I think this is a corrective. I've met with Kaplan before. I've talked to Zuckerberg briefly at times, and I hope that this is a sunnier day, that we are coming to a new understanding of, and I also think that the community notes model that X has created and Elon Musk has spearheaded is really nice because you know what it is? It's a conversation. It's other Americans correcting each other instead of a priest and priestess situation and the Pharisees that talk down to us. And I think people will be more trusting of that, and I think it's more effective.
Well, I agree with that. And like you, I've had chances to sit down with Mark and with Joel in the past, and I've enjoyed them. I've not always agreed with them, but I'm not a big Facebook user. I want to give you two reactions preparing to talk to Joel Kaplan today, I made sure I surveyed everyone's responses. Christine Rosen, one of the smartest people on the planet, as far as I can tell. Politics is just an obstacle to power with Zuckerberg. If ultra progressives come along in 2028, Meta will switch again. Over to the left, Brian Stelter. Meta's framing in its PR blog post is more speech and fewer mistakes. An alternative title could be more lies and more confusion. Can he actually win this debate, Mary Catherine? Because nobody's ready to believe him.
Wait, this is why I'm sympathetic to him, but I'm also skeptical because in 2019 he gave this great speech and then 2020 happened, right? Now that was an emergency situation. I have a little more leeway for people making decisions at that time. However, it was pretty bad to collude with the Biden administration, the actual federal government. That's a bright line that you can sort of be really careful about. And I normally agree with Christine Rosen, but I want to hope for better. I want to hope that he is actually intellectually sort of honest or converted on this issue. And by the way, I have a theory about him, which is that he's become based through MMA. Have I told you this?
Oh, interesting. Oh, I'll try and run that out with Joel. If he is, it would not be unusual. Lots of people become based because of MMA. Yes. I do believe, though, that they've got to do one more thing, and I'm going to ask Joel about that. I want them to abolish the Meta Supreme Court. I got briefed over at Meta's headquarters inside the Beltway when they were doing their big push on conservatives 5 years ago. That's when I went out and had dinner with Mark, and Mark came to the Nixon Library and all this different stuff. And then COVID happened, and you're right. But I am skeptical of their willingness to go with the American genome, which is free speech, when their world court, their 25 to 40 experts are 2/3 or 3/4 from abroad. Mike McConnell is one of the smartest guys in America, but I think they need to get rid of that court and own their platform. What do you think?
That sounds very smart to me. I remember talking about that Supreme Court at the time before it was created and saying, you got to be really careful who's on this thing. So this is the thing. Look, if Brazilian jiu-jitsu training has indeed turned him based, then he would be friendly to that argument that the American system is unique in this way and therefore should be reflected in this Supreme Court, or it should be done away with. So I think he might be open to that. So I'd be interested what Joel says.
They have sunk costs, which are pretty extraordinary. But they're also, I think that the seeing off of Nick Clegg and the welcoming of Joel reflects a cutting of sunk costs. Last word to you, Mary Catherine.
Look, I said it's a tricky problem. Content moderation is hard, but there's also a lot of actual legal issues, criminal issues happening on social media. So my advice was always maybe let's stick to enforcing those issues first because you have limited resources, and then worry about the bad opinions of Americans later. I'm also excited to see that PolitiFact has just gotten a gut punch because they wasted their opportunity to be an honest ref, and this is what they're reaping.
We got to pause for a moment. We got a moment. I am too doing jumping jacks because PolitiFact, it's sort of a dressed up, jumped up Media Matters for America. It's a left-wing hit place, and people don't know that until they've gotten incoming from them, and they are always biased. I mean, they're never not biased, Mary Catherine.
No, they're embarrassing. I think the last decent call they made was the 2013 lie of the year was, if you like your plan, you can keep it, or not, whatever year that was. If you like your plan, you can keep it, which they were right on that one. But since then, really, really bad.
Yeah, the lie of the year this year was not, Joe Biden is impaired. What do you know? Isn't that the lie of the year, obviously?
Seems like it should be. Seems like
yeah.
No, they're very
Mary
bad.
Catherine, looking forward to getting hammered later today. I'm sure it will post. I probably missed it yesterday because I was busy watching things burn down. But I'll be getting hammered with Vic Mattis and your new Normally podcast, which I enjoy a great deal. Even though you people are talking a different language, your co-host, Carolyn, is really funny. So keep going on that one too. Don't merge the two. We don't need the Borg. We need both branding, Getting Hammered and Normally. Thank you, Mary Catherine.
All right, take care, Hugh.
Los Angeles is burning. I'm Hugh Hewitt in Studio West. There are no fires in Orange County at this hour, so my studio, my Relief Factor studio, they're all both safe, and the wind is howling. 100-mile-an-hour gusts last hour, and the evacuation area has now been extended to northern Santa Monica. If it jumps the San Vicente Road, it's going to be disaster upon disaster. I will keep you posted as we go along. There is no reporting because there is no sunshine. There is nothing to be able to tell except what the authorities. The best thing to do is look at the evacuation map and don't screw around. I've had to do it twice. It's no fun. Then you unpack, but it's better than getting burned out. Make sure your pets and your family are safe. Here's the conclusion of my conversation with Mary Catherine Ham from the break between hour 1 and hour 2, and I continue to get updates, and we'll bring them to you as they occur, as news is available, but it's still the middle of the night, and we really don't know anything. Here's Mary Catherine Ham. Welcome back. I'm talking with Mary Catherine Ham from last hour. I asked her to stick around to comment on the meta reform movement, what Matt Continetti called to me, Mary Catherine, an American glasnost. How did you react to the Zuckerberg announcement yesterday?
To me, it's obviously good news, right? And some people are complaining like, oh, this is him buttering up Trump. Well, if the way that you're buttering up Trump is to do less censorship, then great. We all win. The way to butter up Biden and get on his side was explicitly to censor the American people, particularly during an emergency situation in COVID. So I'm all for it. If you look back at Zuckerberg's, and I'm less cynical about him than others are, I think people who are the head of these companies have a really hard job with content moderation. It is not simple to do this job. However, if you look back at his 2019 speech at Georgetown, his gut seems to be in the right place on freedom of speech. Now, directly after that, COVID happened, and Meta did not come through in sticking up for Americans and their right to free speech in many ways there. And I think this is a corrective. I've met with Kaplan before. I've talked to Zuckerberg briefly at times, and I hope that this is a sunnier day, that we are coming to a new understanding of, and I also think that the community notes model that X has created and Elon Musk has spearheaded is really nice, because you know what it is? It's a conversation. It's other Americans correcting each other instead of a priest and priestess situation and the Pharisees that talk down to us. And I think people will be more trusting of that, and I think it's more effective.
Well, I agree with that. And like you, I've had chances to sit down with Mark and with Joel in the past, and I've enjoyed them. I've not always agreed with them, but I'm not a big Facebook user. I want to give you two reactions. Preparing to talk to Joel Kaplan today, I made sure I surveyed everyone's responses. Christine Rosen, one of the smartest people on the planet, as far as I can tell. Politics is just an obstacle to power with Zuckerberg. If ultra-progressives come along in 2028, Meta will switch again. Over to the left, Brian Stelter. Meta's framing in its PR blog post is more speech and fewer mistakes. An alternative title could be more lies and more confusion. Can he actually win this debate, Mary Catherine? Because nobody's ready to believe him.
Wait, this is why I'm sympathetic to him, but I'm also skeptical, because in 2019 he gave this great speech and then 2020 happened, right? Now that was an emergency situation. I have a little more leeway for people making decisions at that time. However, it was pretty bad to collude with the Biden administration, the actual federal government. That's a bright line that you can sort of be really careful about. And I normally agree with Christine Rosen, but I want to hope for better. I want to hope that he is actually intellectually sort of honest or converted on this issue. And by the way, I have a theory about him, which is that he's become based through MMA. Have I told you this?
Oh, interesting. I'll try and run that out with Joel. If he is, it would not be unusual. Lots of people become based because of MMA. Yes. I do believe, though, that they've got to do one more thing, and I'm going to ask Joel about that. I want them to abolish the Meta Supreme Court. I got briefed over at Meta's headquarters inside the Beltway when they were doing their big push on conservatives 5 years ago. That's when I went out and had dinner with Mark, and Mark came to the Nixon Library and all this different stuff. And then COVID happened, and you're right. But I am skeptical of their willingness to go with the American genome, which is free speech, when their world court, their 25 to 40 experts, are 2/3 or 3/4 from abroad. Mike McConnell is one of the smartest guys in America, but I think they need to get rid of that court and own their platform. What do you think?
That sounds very smart to me. I remember talking about that Supreme Court at the time before it was created and saying, you got to be really careful who's on this thing. So this is the thing. Look, if Brazilian jiu-jitsu training has indeed turned him based, then he would be friendly to that argument that the American system is unique in this way and therefore should be reflected in this Supreme Court, or it should be done away with. So I think he might be open to that. So I'd be interested what Joel says.
They have sunk costs, which are pretty extraordinary. But they're also, I think, that the seeing off of Nick Clegg and the welcoming of Joel reflects a cutting of sunk costs. Last word to you, Mary Catherine.
Look, I said it's a tricky problem. Content moderation is hard, but there's also a lot of actual legal issues, criminal issues happening on social media. So my advice was always like, maybe let's stick to enforcing those issues first, because you have limited resources, and then worry about the bad opinions of Americans later. I'm also excited to see that PolitiFact has just gotten a gut punch because they wasted their opportunity to be an honest ref, and this is what they're reaping.
We got to pause for a moment. We got a moment. I am too doing jumping jacks because PolitiFact, like, is sort of a dressed up, jumped up Media Matters for America. It's a left wing hit place, and people don't know that until they've gotten incoming from them, and they are always biased. I mean, they're never not biased, Mary Catherine.
No, they're embarrassing. I think the last decent call they made was like the 2013 lie of the year was, if you like your plan, you can keep it, or not, whatever year that was. If you like your plan, you can keep it, which they were right on that one. But since then, really, really bad.
Yeah, the lie of the year this year was not, oh, Joe Biden is impaired. What do you know? Isn't that the lie of the year, obviously?
Seems like it should be. Seems like
yeah.
it should be. No, they're very
Mary
bad.
Catherine, looking forward to getting hammered later today. I'm sure it will post. I probably missed it yesterday because I was busy watching things burn down. But I'll be getting hammered with Vic Mattis and your new Normally podcast, which I enjoy a great deal. Even though you people are talking a different language, your co-host, Carolyn, is really funny. So keep going on that one too. Don't merge the two. We don't need the Borg. We need both branding, Getting Hammered and Normally. Thank you, Mary Catherine.
All right, take care, Hugh.
Well, welcome back. The fire has grown to almost 3,000 acres. Now, a square mile, for the benefit of the Steelers fans, is 640 acres. So the Palisades fire is now 3 square miles and out of control. The winds in Orange County, where my Relief Factor studios are located, are gusting between 50 and 100 miles per hour. Praying this doesn't go anywhere else. There's another fire in Sylmar, another one in Pasadena. Everybody send whatever you can. Fire departments, wherever you are. There are joint cooperative agreements with Arizona and with Northern California, so trucks are rushing. But man, I've been here a long time. Lived in California since 1978 off and on. I'm back this semester to teach, and I've arrived in time for maybe, of the time I've been here, 3 earthquakes. This is the 3rd major fire, and it's a big one. California is indeed on fire. Over 3,000 acres have burned, more underway. The winds are extraordinarily high, and we can't see anything because it's dark in California. I am in Southern California, but in Orange County, an hour south. My friends that I've checked on got out. They got out early. God bless them. Some people haven't. Many animals didn't. And there's nothing that can be done because the water has failed in Pacific Palisades. Sylmar fire, Pasadena fire still roaring, and we won't know the extent of the damages until the dawn comes up 6:30 a.m. out in the Pacific. Let me now give you the update on markets. The Dow yesterday was down 0.42. The NASDAQ was down 1.89. And AmericanFederal.com, if you bought gold from them, you made money yesterday, $2,663 an ounce. AmericanFederal.com is my sponsor, Nick Rovich and his team, 800-221-7694. You don't leave gold at home. And I'm going to use this moment telling you, if you're buying gold, do it from Nick and his team, because American Federal is honest as the day is long. It's a very straightforward transaction. How much is the price of gold today? Here's our commission. Send us the cash or the check or the money order, and once it clears, they just price you out and they tell you in advance what the commission is. But don't keep your gold at home. My guess is there's a lot of melted gold in Pacific Palisades. A lot of pictures have gone up, and a lot of wealth destroyed, most of it insured, some of it not. What a disaster for people. But if you've got your passports, your photographs, and your kids and your pets, you're okay. People can and do recover. Our family went through one major fire, not my immediate family, but our cousins, and it's a pretty awful event. it's emotionally wrenching. It's destructive of your psyche and your restfulness, and you lose a lot. But if you go through the drill, you know passports, photos, and papers are what matter. And if you've got valuables, if you keep your gold at home, take it with you. But if you're buying gold for your safety deposit box, which won't burn down, call our friends at AmericanFederal.com, 1-800-221-7694. Here's the conclusion of my conversation with Matt Continetti from last hour. I'm back with Matt Continetti. We're picking up, Matt, where I had teed it up with these 5 moments, these anniversaries that are coming up, and what rhetorical points Trump can make. Because if we are indeed at a rebuke of the far left, if that's what's happened, it should be articulated and packaged the right way. What would you advise his speechwriting staff, or if he hired McConnell and Scully or any of the other shops in D.C., which are really great wordsmiths, what themes do you think they ought to hit? I have my own set, but what do you think?
Well, I would just start, Hugh, by going back to some of the speeches Trump made in his first term. I think his speech to the people of Poland in 2017, I think his speech in front of Mount Rushmore in 2020, I think elements of his farewell address, actually, where he talked about the achievements of his first term and the American spirit. So I would go back to those speeches, and then I try to distill the message of them, and then pour that message into what he's going to talk about, whether it is Lexington and Concord coming up, or America's declaration at 250 in next year in 2026. And what I think, the message of Donald Trump's most important speeches is America is a nation. A nation has borders, but a nation also has a certain spirit. And the American spirit is energetic, can-do, individualistic, and always reaching for the stars. And I expect him to voice similar themes in his speeches in the coming 4 years.
Yeah, if I were king of the forest, I would get us away from the American century and talk about the American millennium, that we are not going anywhere and we are not going to be usurped. I don't know that he'll do anything that way, but I do believe that all this stuff about Greenland, the Panama Canal, Canada, the Gulf of America, these are all Trump's initial salvos in the American millennium is on us, not the American century ending. Last word to you, Matt. Do you think he's trying to evidence that kind of a mindset?
I think you're beginning to see some of it when President-elect Trump talks about America's golden age. He mentioned that again at his press conference yesterday in Florida, and I think it will be the theme of his second inaugural address, that after 2024, America will enter a golden age of economic development, creativity, and it seems clear from listening to Donald Trump, territorial expansion as well.
More coming up from Matt Continetti later in the program. Andrew McCarthy is going to join us from New York to update us on President-elect Trump's legal obstacles. The politicization of the New York courts is as extraordinary as the incompetence of the Los Angeles County and city governments, not the fire department. They are out there on the front lines, as are the first responders, being amazing as Los Angeles burns. Los Angeles is burning at this hour. There are 3 fires in L.A. The Palisades fire has covered almost 3,000 acres, out of control, no containment. Eaton fire in Sylmar, only 1,000 acres, but it just got started a couple hours ago, and the winds are blowing it everywhere. Pasadena, the Hearst fire, 500 acres burned, also no containment there. I'll keep you posted. The water pressure has failed in Pacific Palisades. It's going to be thousands of homes, I think. I think it's going to be thousands of homes. I'm joined from New York City by Andrew C. McCarthy. Andy, before we get down to the legal gymnastics that the New York City corrupt judicial system is putting the president-elect through, I wonder about your reaction to these fires from an East Coast perspective. What do you think?
It's horrifying. It's just, I think it's one of these things where, we're not riveted to it, and then all of a sudden you see these images this morning, and it's really shocking, and it kind of, I think in a way it slaps you in the face with, this is what these people's dark reality is, and, we seem remote from it, but it's very hard to it kind of reminds you how small you think your problems are when you see people go through.
Thank you. Absolutely. I have no problems. I live in Southern California 3 months out of the year when I'm teaching every other year, and I'm doing it this semester. So I just keep looking at Orange County. The map here is fine, but the winds are 70 miles an hour, Gus. It's crazy.
Yeah, like that.
Andrew, let's talk a little bit about blue cities before we move to Donald Trump. New York City has a public safety crisis. Chicago has that plus a collapse of its school system. Now California has a failure of infrastructure. And I do mean, although we have the bravest firefighters in the world and first responders, there's no water pressure in Pacific Palisades. It's failed. What is up with these blue cities?
Well, I think the deeper problem is, we could talk about the politics and the crazy policies, but why do people keep electing these characters who just make it worse and worse? And I guess you could argue that there's no viable alternative in these one-party cities. I find that hard to believe. I've been spending a lot of time in Chicago over the past few years, and it really did look, before Brandon Johnson got elected, like Chicago was coming to its senses, pushed out the last radical leftist mayor, and looked like they were going to try to at least elect a centrist Democrat rather than a progressive whack job. But the thing is, in Chicago at least, the teachers union is it's the most powerful force in the city. I think these municipal unions are a big part of the reason for the conditions that we're seeing in these blue cities, and the idea that in a lot of these negotiations with the municipal governments, they're kind of on both sides of the table, right? Because they they cut their deals, but the people who are the government officials are people who have the support of the unions. Or in Brandon Johnson's case, I think he's on leave from the union, and as soon as he's finished as mayor, he goes back to the union. But I think that's the problem. People don't have a viable alternative. It looked for a second like Chicago was going to elect this other guy. I think he ended up losing by 2 or 3 points, and now we have the worst mayor we've ever had in
and a cataclysmic collapse of the education system. Okay, Andrew, let's move to the Trump circus. And Judge Joker, who's in charge of this, is trying to get to sentence Donald Trump for a rhetorical win, which I think will backfire. But let's get the facts first. Where do we stand legally on the attempt to convict the president?
Yeah, I think when I read Judge Merchan's order from last week, I really thought he was kind of resigned to the idea that he was trying to push this forward, but it probably wouldn't work. There's passages in the opinion that seem to indicate that, if I'm allowed to conduct the sentence on Friday, and, if some intervening event doesn't happen. So you get the impression reading the opinion that he himself didn't expect that he was actually going to get Trump sentenced on Friday. And, to take your initial point, that really is the overriding thing. They are trying to get him convicted. There's no purpose in going forward with this except for the fact that in the criminal law, it's at the point of the imposition of sentence where the judgment of conviction gets entered. And what they desperately want, New York progressives, is to have Trump branded a convicted felon before he enters the White House. So in order to try to buy Trump off from objecting to this, Merchan is really basically improperly under the law signaled that, look, I won't give you a jail sentence, I won't give you probation, won't be a fine. They call this unconditional discharge. But we have to get on with this because there's a great public interest in finality here. And in point of fact, I think the election shows there's no public interest in having Donald Trump found guilty formally of a crime. There's an interest among progressive Democrats in New York, but if there was an interest in having Donald Trump branded a felon, the election result couldn't conceivably have come out the way that it did. So what this is all about is a cabal of hardline Democrats who want to get this guy sentenced so that they can brand him a felon as he goes into office. That's really all it's about.
I do want to state boldly, though, it definitely impacts the president-elect, his time, his thinking, his staffing, his job. And he has a job as president-elect and having to pursue appeals of all this nonsense. And it is absolute crap. I want people to understand that. We don't even use stronger language than that because we're FCC regulated. It is the worst. I am embarrassed for my profession and for your profession, Andy, in New York. I'm not a member of the New York Bar, but I'm embarrassed that this is happening because it does impact the presidency as the appeals will. There's really no leg to stand on for Judge Joker.
No, I think the way that he's pulled this off is kind of in small compass exactly the kind of circus that you've just described. I mean, what he basically did here, the ruling that he made on Friday, Merchant could have done that 6 weeks ago. He's gone up against the wire here because what he was trying to accomplish, I think, was give Trump, practically speaking, as little time as possible to find either a superior state court or a federal court to intervene to put the brakes on the sentencing. You're asking where I think this goes. I think because Trump did not get relief from the appellate division in the emergency hearing yesterday, I would think that his next move is to go to the Second Circuit Federal Court of Appeals in Manhattan. The reason being he's already got a pending removal appeal there, and I think he can make the argument to the circuit that if the sentencing goes forward, basically the appeal that he's already got in front of the Second Circuit, which I think has a lot of merit, gets frustrated. So at the very least, ask the federal court to put the brakes on the sentencing until the removal appeal can be decided. It would seem to me that would be his next move.
So let's explain to people, we have two systems here, a state system where all the craziness is going on, that is not convicted, but that has had a jury verdict against Trump, for which he would be sentenced to neither time nor a fine, according to Merchant. I'm not sure why we're doing this, but it went over to the appellate division in the New York state courts yesterday and was rejected. Today they might go over to Foley Plaza and try the federal courts. And what would the motion be, Andy? This is not my world. I don't know the Second Circuit at all or the rules there. What is the motion?
Yeah, so I should clarify since you're asking me that precise question about remedies he's seeking. What he was really asking for in the appellate division yesterday was there was a merits portion of it, but what he was mainly looking for was to get a stay of the sentencing while he litigates these claims that he wants to make against Judge Merchant personally and the immunity aspects of the post-trial litigation. And the court said the merit stuff could go forward, but it refused to stay the sentencing while that happened, which is really frustrating for Trump. So I think what's going on in Manhattan is Trump tried to remove the case from state court to federal court early on. That went in front of a judge called Alvin Hellerstein in the Southern District of New York, my old haunts, Federal District Court in Manhattan. Hellerstein is a 90-year-old senior judge appointed by President Clinton in the late 90s. He rejected Trump's claim, but Trump went back after the Supreme Court did its immunity ruling in July, pointing out that the representations that the district attorney's office made to Judge Hellerstein about what they intended to prove at the trial turned out not to be true. They ended up getting into a lot of Trump's official acts as president, which is exactly the stuff that the Supreme Court says is verboten. And rather than deal with that, Judge Hellerstein basically gave it the back of the hand, which is why Trump appealed to the Second Circuit and why there's a pending appeal there. So what I think he'll now do is go to the circuit rather than going back to Hellerstein's a waste of time, and he doesn't have time between now and Friday. So I think what he ought to do is go back to the circuit and say, if you don't stay the sentencing that this judge is planning to do in the state on Friday, my appeal will be frustrated. And I have good faith federal arguments why this state prosecution frustrates, the official conduct of federal duties, which is what he's wanted to raise all along. And whether you think he's right or wrong about that, I think he should at least be able to get a decision on the merits, and it'll be mooted if Merchan does the sentencing on Friday.
Does it get mooted? That's my question, because it seems to me that the case for staying the state court is overwhelming, given the immunity decision. The Second Circuit ought to issue the stay. It doesn't go to the merits. It said, wait a minute, we got to get through this, because that is a very clearly applicable bit of law. And Andy, the case, yeah. Trump versus the United States, it's very applicable to the Second Circuit's ruling today.
Yeah, I think the thing is, that everybody who follows this stuff knew that the Supreme Court was very likely, especially after the oral argument, which took place at the beginning of Trump's trial in Manhattan. In fact, Trump couldn't be at the Supreme Court hearing, even though he wanted to be, because it was a trial day in front of Merchan, and Merchan wouldn't give him the day off to go to the Supreme Court argument. So everybody who followed that knew that the Supreme Court was likely to rule that presidents had immunity or some measure of it. And knowing that, Bragg introduced and Merchan allowed him to introduce evidence of Trump's official acts as president in the trial.
Andrew C. McCarthy, who is our go-to guy on matters criminal and procedural, with to do with Trump and with terrorism always. And if you haven't yet subscribed and liked the McCarthy Report, hosted by Rich Lowry, with Andy every week, you ought to, sometimes twice a week. And I love that Rich brings intelligence, but not a law degree to those conversations, Andy, because it's better. You know, I assume a lot of stuff when I'm talking to you, and I'm not a criminal lawyer, but I'm a pretty good civil lawyer. But I think Rich brings just a inquisitive mind and a great general depth of knowledge. And I do you think most ordinary people understand that the Supreme Court handed down a very important decision that has not been taken into account by Judge Joker Merchan? Because I'm really had it with this guy now. This is such a rawly political embarrassment for the rule of law that we just ought to call him a joker.
Yeah, I don't think that he has taken into account the Supreme Court's admonitions in the immunity decision in July. I also thought that frankly, about Jack Smith as well. I think a lot of the people who are opposed to that decision are trying to rewrite it as if it says something that didn't say. But I thought that, coming out of that decision, almost as important as the exact terms that the court used was the monitory tone of the opinion, which was basically to say, look, there's ways of holding presidents accountable if they abuse their powers or step outside the lines. But in our system, those checks belong to Congress, not to prosecutors, not to the criminal justice system. And I think what the court was trying to say is, we think this whole idea of prosecuting presidents and former presidents in the criminal justice system is a bad idea. We don't have to go any further at the moment than to say, if it's a core presidential duty we're talking about, like control of the Justice Department, there's absolute immunity. But the other thing they said, which these prosecutors and the courts in New York don't seem to be accounting for, is we're going to say that if it's any kind of presidential activity, the president has at least presumptive immunity. What they suggested is they might be prepared to go to absolute immunity, but they didn't need to in order to decide the case that was before them. But the very strong message out of the opinion is this whole idea of having prosecutors check the president is a bad idea that I think the court is resistant to, which is why I think if Trump could get in front of the Supreme Court on what he wants to claim in New York, he'd have a lot better shot than certainly with the judges in New York and perhaps with the intermediate appeals levels in the federal system.
I think it's what a musical calls a mortal lock. I think he's going to win a mortal lock win in New York eventually. And what Merchan is trying to do is, I don't know, color on the picture. Merchan reminds me of the Stop Oil people who throw paint on paintings or destroy Christmas trees, Andy. We're coming back from break, 30 seconds, and I want to talk to you after the break about the general problem here. But do you think it's that solid of a a certain outcome that I'm putting forward?
I think if there's a direct appeal, there's about 10 reasons to grant it. And I also think, Merchant knows that he's being ridiculous, because if Trump really did what Merchant describes him as doing, you wouldn't give him a no jail sentence. I mean,
oh, that's a very good point. Bad news, California. A fourth fire is now underway. The Tyler fire is slightly south of the 10. It is merely 20 acres at this point, but it's very close to Coachella and Indio, and with the winds blowing from the east to the west, pretty populated area. I just hope we're not stretched too thin. The fires are just out of control in Pacific Palisades, Sylmar, and Pasadena. Zero containment. I'll keep you posted in the third hour. We won't know much until afterward. During the break, I talked with Andrew McCarthy, and we ended on a point that I want to pick up on now. Judge Merchan knows it's a joke. Otherwise, he wouldn't have said what he did. Would you expand on that, Andy? Because you're right. Hadn't occurred to me. He's conceding this is all a sham.
Yeah, if we remember this, what Trump is actually charged with are these trivial business records, what would ordinarily be misdemeanors in New York. And the way they tried to gussy that up into felonies and therefore get around the 2-year statute of limitations, which would have barred this whole thing in the first place, was to say that Trump falsified his business records in order to commit another crime. And to make a long story short, the other crime that they allege he committed was basically to steal the 2016 election by not making disclosures that they claimed falsely were required under federal campaign law. And my point is, if you're accusing him of what would be the crime of the century, which is theft of the most powerful office in the world, the most important office in the United States, how on earth would you sentence somebody who was convicted of that, if you really believe that's what he did, to no jail, no probation, and no fine?
You wouldn't. These are not serious people, though. Yesterday, when I learned that Jack Smith is going to file a report, I was just kind of blown away, Andy. I've been dealing with the special counsel law, the independent counsel law, and then back to the special counsel regulations for 30 years. I was on the court that appointed I was the clerk to the 3-judge panel that appointed Jacob Stein under the independent counsel. I know how it works. This is a joke. Jack Smith does not need to file a report, do you think?
I think he not only doesn't need to, I think it's shocking that he's doing it under circumstances where the reason the Mar-a-Lago case was dismissed was because Judge Cannon, in a very thoughtful 93-page opinion, which kind of echoed what Justice Thomas said in his concurrence in the immunity case, found that his appointment was invalid under the Constitution's appointments clause, which means he was disqualified. Importantly, the Justice Department dropped its appeal of Judge Cannon's ruling in the 11th Circuit with respect to Trump. So the law of the case is that Smith is disqualified. So we're not only in a situation where you don't need a final report, because for 2+ years this case has been extensively charged in narrative indictments, and it's been litigated to the hilt. So the last thing you need is an explanation of why he charged what he charged. He told you in the documents themselves. But he's not eligible to act as a prosecutor in this case.
And what he's doing is fan service, Andy. It's sort of like my asking from the McCarthy report 3 times a week instead of once a week. There are people addicted to hating Trump, and they want to hold up a report from Jack Smith, who, as you correctly point out, does not have standing to issue a report because he was improperly appointed as a special counsel. It's absurd everywhere. And I don't know that it isn't solidifying. Is it good for Trump? Do you think it's good for it certainly annoys him, but do you think it's good for him politically?
I think right now it is. The temptation on this, I think we know, having been, at different avenues of the Justice Department, we know the importance of it and what it means to the rule of law. I think the temptation for Trump, because he's been in the eye of the storm here, will be to basically go tit for tat with the Democrats and say basically, the only way we'll stop lawfare is if they feel what lawfare is like when they're on the receiving end of it. And I think that would be a bad move. I hope he doesn't. I hope they resist the urge to do that, because I think in large measure Trump may be president because of lawfare.
Oh, I think you're right. I think they elected. I think Juan Merchan and Alvin Bragg and Jack Smith elected Donald Trump because of Jack Smith. And you've said this many times. If he'd brought an obstruction case, it would have been. I don't know what the defense is. No defense ever had to be mounted, but it was the one thing that was unassailable, right? The obstruction case, as alleged, was unassailable.
Yeah, but the thing is, this goes to what you just said. He can't contain himself. He can't control himself. I mean, he didn't. It wasn't enough to file one classified documents charge, right? He had to put 36 in, and he's in a hot panic to get to trial. But anybody who's been around the block once knows that if you bring one classified information charge, you're buying on to like a year plus of litigation over classified information admissibility issues. But he couldn't contain himself.
Andrew C. McCarthy and I are talking before my interview with Joel Kaplan, which began this hour, but I kept it for the bottom of the hour so you could hear it. Andy, what do you make of the meta changes?
Well, I'm happy to see them. Part of me wants to say it's too little, too late, Hugh, in the sense that it would have been really nice if Zuckerberg got religion while that case was still pending in front of the Supreme Court, because basically in that case in which the government and government agents used their influence in order to get a third-party actor, the platforms, to suppress speech, which government wouldn't be allowed to do on its own, what the Supreme Court ultimately decided was that there wasn't enough evidence to show a direct link between the policies and the actions of the government actors and the suppression of the speech. And I think if Zuckerberg had come forward earlier, he would have been that link. And then that could have been a real opportunity for the Supreme Court to come down on the government and say what I always do as a prosecutor, which is if the Constitution tells me I can't do something, then I can't get a private third party to do it for me and say that it's all fine.
I am sort of on the other side, Andy. I'm glad they didn't reach the merits because I thought it would have involved an expansion of the state action doctrine. And we're really in the weeds here. But that already in Brentwood Academy goes to a whole bunch of things that are entangled up with the government. I don't think they wanted to get into this forest of regulatory overgrowth, and that there were, I believe, 4 justices were ready to throw themselves in, but Roberts held them back, or was it only 3?
I'm remembering now. I don't remember the division. I remember Barrett wrote the opinion. It was very exacting about what the causation was. And I do agree. I don't think the court should be doing that kind of regulation. But just as, and maybe this is more of a political point than a legal one, Hugh, but it really galls me that the government actors who did what they did here, which was...
Oh, gosh, yes. If they had kept it up.
Held accountable.
If they had kept it up, if they had proved actual rightness, then I would have been for them coming in and savaging everyone. Let me close this way. I'm going to make an ask of Joel Kaplan. Shut down the oversight board. Even though you've got a great judge and Mike McConnell as your chairman, I think it's 30 or 40 people, 2/3 or 3/4 of whom are not from the United States legal world. Ours is the First Amendment fortress. What do you think about their oversight board and the fact that it tries to be a Supreme Court for Meta?
Yeah, I guess I should probably be hesitant to weigh in here because I don't know enough about it. I think the world of Judge McConnell, but I don't know.
You and me both, yeah.
I don't know enough about how it's comprised. But I would agree with your overarching point that we should not take in influence even from our friendly allied countries in Europe when it comes to free expression because we're miles ahead of them. And if they're influencing what we do, that can't be good.
That's very well put. And I want to close there. The EU is different from the U.S., and Facebook is an international company, and they have clearly tried for the past 6 years to satisfy both audiences as well as the third world audience. It doesn't work. You've just got to plant your flag in the United States rule of law and hope we protect you. Do you think that is where they are headed?
I sure hope so. It looks like that. if Zuckerberg is sincere with what he said in the last few days, we have a very good editorial about. I can say this, Hugh, because I'm not the author of it. We don't sign our editorials, but we have a great editorial at NR on this subject. And I think if he's authentic, if he's sincere in what he said, it's a great day for speech.
I agree with that. Andrew C. McCarthy, thank you for joining me early. I will be back to you as we proceed through the Second Circuit and the Supreme Court appeals by Friday. Gosh, this Mershon guy. Good. I don't know how you live there, Andy. But you are. Are you a Mets fan? Did you got thrown out of this? And then Rich got thrown out of it. I'm a Guardians fan. I got thrown out by Richard. So we're all losers in media. Does anyone like the Dodgers? Really? Nobody does.
Well, yeah, I'm not making fun of L.A. today for the reasons you brought up during our conversation.
Fair point. Fair point. There may be some. In fact, I'm pretty certain there are some Dodgers people who have lost their homes. Well said. Well reminded. Andrew C. McCarthy, thank you. Follow him on X at Andrew C. McCarthy. Listen to the McCarthy Report with Rich Lowry. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you. Thank you.
Los Angeles is on fire. There are 4 fires burning at this hour. The Palisades fire is devastating. It's almost 3,000 acres. Hundreds of homes, if not thousands, have been lost. The Eaton fire is in Sylmar, the Hearst fire in Pasadena, and now a new fire, the Tyler fire in Riverside. I'll keep you posted throughout the hour. I begin this hour with Joel Kaplan, head of global affairs for Meta. Good morning, Joel. Welcome on the day after Mark Zuckerberg's big announcement. The news may completely focus on the tragedy out here. I would guess you've got a lot of Meta employees in Los Angeles, don't you?
Yeah, well, first of all, good morning, Hugh. Thanks for having me. And yeah, terrible to wake up to the news and hear about all these fires in such a beautiful area. We do have some Meta employees in an office in Los Angeles. We're headquartered a little further north, but yeah, our hearts really go out to everybody who's dealing with these fires. Hope they get them under control.
I will keep giving updates throughout the hour, but now I want to turn to the aftermath of Mark Zuckerberg's policy. I played it on the air yesterday, and I have collected reactions to talk with you about. But first, how do you think the public is receiving the change of course that Mark Zuckerberg laid out in the video yesterday?
Yeah, thanks, Hugh. I'm glad you all had a chance to listen and talk about them yesterday. I think the reaction has been really great, and I think people are ready for a return to the values of free expression on our platforms that Mark laid out yesterday, and we had a chance to talk about. Things like eliminating the third-party fact-checking program, which has just been too politically biased, changing our rules to allow for greater space for political debate about issues like immigration or gender or trans issues, and changing our enforcement, how we actually enforce those rules to really dramatically cut down on mistakes, which make up the lion's share of the censorship that people experience on our platform. So all of those things are really important for getting back to those roots in free expression. And, the reaction I've gotten has been really positive.
Now, Joel, very few people know you're deputy assistant to the president under George W. Bush. So you've been in the hurricane. You know what it's like when too many things are happening. Meta is sort of like a private sector White House. Everything happens to Meta because it's around the world. It's involved in everything. How is this played in countries not named the United States of America?
Yeah, look, we do operate in almost every country around the world, and not all of those countries have, in fact, really none of those countries have the First Amendment like the United States and have that deep-rooted commitment as a country to freedom of expression. And, we have to operate in all of those countries. One of the challenges we've had over the last few years is that when you have a U.S. administration that puts pressure on companies like ours to moderate more content, censor more speech, it really invites even greater regulation and censorship in other countries. So one of the things we're looking forward to is working with President Trump and his administration to push back on some of the countries that have taken a much more aggressive approach through regulation to censorship online. So, we'll see how it all lands in different places around the world, but we're excited that this is a real opportunity for us to push forward on free expression everywhere around the world.
I'd like to give you 2 reactions that I spent the day collecting them, Joel Kaplan. One from Christine Rosen at AEI, who I think is really one of the smartest people in American politics, said on their podcast yesterday, and they spent most of their hour on the commentary podcast talking about Meta, Politics is just an obstacle to power for Zuckerberg. If ultra progressives come along in 2028, Meta will switch again. That's from a very serious intellectual on the right. On the left, Brian Stelter. Meta's framing in its PR blog post is more speech and fewer mistakes. An alternative title could be more lies and more confusion. In between are the too little too late people. I mean, how do you deal with a spectrum of responses like that?
Well, our job is to focus on what we think is the right thing to do for the people who use our platform in the United States and around the world. And we think the right thing to do is to give them a platform and space to express themselves and share what's important to them. And some people are going to like that, and some people aren't. But the important thing is we really have an opportunity now to get back to those roots. When Mark Zuckerberg founded this company, you don't found a company like this one that has this kind of mission if you don't really believe in voice and giving people a voice. So I think that is the true north for this company, and this is just a great opportunity for us to seize the moment and return to those founding principles for Mark and for the company.
Mark Zuckerberg gave his speech in Georgetown in 2019. Then COVID came along and kind of upended anything. And he's been a guest on this program, and I've been a guest in his home. So I think he's trying his best to figure out how to work a world that wants free expression and some places is punished for it. But I think it was a misstep. This is Hugh Hewitt, nobody else, just a radio talk show host, to do the oversight board. Even though you got Judge McConnell, who may be the greatest brain in America, to be its chair. Is that on the table, or is that a sunk cost that you're stuck with?
Well, look, I'm glad you mentioned Judge McConnell, because I think that's indicative of what the purpose of the oversight board was, which was actually to promote freedom of expression in places around the world where it's a lot harder to defend and where they're less likely to trust a U.S.-based company to make those decisions. And Judge McConnell was chosen because of his longstanding commitment and expertise, academic and judicial expertise on freedom of expression. So that really is the purpose of the oversight board. I know that it sometimes can be construed otherwise by critics, but that's what Mark's intent was with the oversight board. And in lots of instances around the world, they have been able to defend freedom of expression from what would otherwise be pretty aggressive censorship from governments.
Now, Andrew McCarthy was on with me just before this, and we were talking about the oversight board. 3/4 of its members do not come from the United States. Is there any benefit to the company of having an oversight board that reflects, if I can put it this way, a European consensus on speech, which is much more heavy-handed than the American genome, which is stay away unless it's child porn or an imminent call to imminent violence, the Brandenburg test? Any rethinking of that, Joel?
That's a very good question about how do you have a global, our services are used, 95% of the people who use our services are outside the United States.
Wow.
And so this board together, it's you don't usually think of it that way, but when you have 4 billion people monthly using the platforms, but just by definition, they've got to be mostly outside the United States. So that's why we have a global board. But I certainly hear and understand the criticism of does that make sense when you're talking about content that's being posted and seen by people in the United States primarily? And I think that's an important question, and one that I know we'll look at, and the board and the trustees of the board, I think we'll probably take a look at as well.
A last question. I think the FTC has been run by ideologues for the last 4 years, and Chairman Khan going away will be a good thing for everyone. But what happens with Facebook and Meta and all the other social media companies under a Trump regime that will be different than under the Biden regime?
Well, I think there's great reason for all of the tech companies and for businesses generally to be very optimistic that we're going to come out from under this really heavy-handed regime that we've had over the last 4 years of just regulation across the board, which has been, I think, a real hindrance to growth. And the thing that the new administration and President Trump in particular are really focused on is just American competitiveness and leadership. And that's incredibly important for our company and our tech sector. Things like AI, having somebody like David Sachs put in to oversee AI policy, I think that's going to be an incredible boost to innovation and technological leadership and the competitive edge that's made America, the envy of the world for so many years.
If I can hold on to you for one more minute, Joel, I have one question about artificial intelligence that I'll do during the break and play afterwards. Stand by. I will continue to update you, Southern California and the country, on the fire. LA is burning, and I cannot underplay what you're going to see when the sun comes up on the West Coast, because the winds are still between 50 and 100 mile an hour gusts throughout Southern California. And it's at 4,000 acres in Palisades. It is growing in Pasadena and Sylmar, and one fire has begun in Riverside. I will continue to bring you breaking news. This is why we have AM radio. Also reminding everyone I'm moving to the afternoon next week, 3 to 6 p.m., so I can drive people home rather than take them to work, and be live in the West Coast markets, and everyone can hear us from noon to 3, beginning on Monday of next week. Don't go anywhere, however. I'm going to continue to talk to Joel Kaplan about AI and the regulatory scheme when I come back. In the meantime, big win for free speech yesterday with Mark Zuckerberg's expression of a change back to their original approach, the dismissal of the fact-checking legions, most of whom were politicized beyond belief. Joel Kaplan, who is the chief of global affairs for Meta. Joel, guests on this show include Mark Zuckerberg and Peter Thiel and David Sachs and everyone who concerns about artificial intelligence. And I know the regulatory scheme's got to be developed. Two questions. Where do you want that regulatory scheme to be developed? At the FTC, in Congress, or in the marketplace? And the second, where do you want the small modular nuclear power reactors to go? Because you can't get to AI nirvana unless you guys have power.
Yeah, those are two great questions that go right to the heart of our future ability to lead as a country on AI. On regulation, we really think you got to be careful at these early stages of regulating and preventing the kind of innovation that's really going to revolutionize, most of the economy. And I think that David Sachs and the administration are going to be very thoughtful about that, making sure that the thing that we probably need to regulate is any kind of dangerous uses of AI, not regulate the technology right at the heart of it, right? So you want to make sure that the innovations can still happen, and as with any technology, there will be people who try to misuse it, and you want to regulate it at that level. So that's where we think they should go on on regulation. On small nuclear reactors, modular reactors, you're absolutely right. The advances in AI require a tremendous amount of compute power, which requires a tremendous amount of energy. And we just haven't been building enough power plants in this country. And I think President Trump and his administration are really focused on making it much easier to invest and build power of all kinds in this country, and I think in the coming years, nuclear has to be a huge part of that, and the technological advances we're starting to see in small modular reactors hopefully can play an important role in the future of AI.
Joel Kaplan, thank you. Because of the American century is going to be the American millennium, we need meta, and we need power, and we need artificial intelligence to be led by the United States. Thank you for your time, Joel Kaplan. Congratulations on the new job, though I don't envy you your PR assignment today, getting out there and arguing with the world about whether it's good or bad. Thank you, Joel, for starting the day with me.
Thanks, Hugh. Great to be with you.
Governor Newsom has announced on X that mutual aid is pouring in from across the state to battle the Palisades fire. Perhaps, but they're also going to have to go to Riverside. There's a new fire there. Pasadena, where there is a fire, and to Sylmar, where there is a fire. The one in the Palisades is the nightmare. It's 4,000 acres, and it's getting bigger. And the winds are blowing so that Fetching Mrs. Hewitt and I opened up the front door last night. We're in Orange County. We've been here since 1989, and I lived here. I have never felt wind like this. And I've seen firestorms. We've had to pack the house twice. I have never seen anything like this. So it's going to be a very long day. The sun won't come up for another hour or so we don't know how bad it is, but we'll keep you posted. Here's the conclusion of my conversation with Joel Kaplan. Then I'd love to hear from any of you who are near the fires. 1-800-520-1234, 1-800-520-1234. Are you getting out now? But here's Joel Kaplan and I during the break. Welcome back. I have one more question for Joel Kaplan, who is the Chief of Global Affairs for Meta. Joel, guests on this show include Mark Zuckerberg and Peter Thiel and David Sachs and everyone who concerns about artificial intelligence. And I know the regulatory scheme's got to be developed. Two questions. Where do you want that regulatory scheme to be developed? At the FTC, in Congress, or in the marketplace? And the second, where do you want the small modular nuclear power reactors to go? Because you can't get to AI nirvana unless you guys have power.
Yeah, those are two great questions that go right to the heart of our future ability to lead as a country on AI. On regulation, we really think you got to be careful at these early stages of regulating and preventing the kind of innovation that's really going to revolutionize, most of the economy. And I think that David Sachs and the administration are going to be very thoughtful about that, making sure that the thing that we probably need to regulate is any kind of dangerous uses of AI, not regulate the technology right at the heart of it, right? So you want to make sure that the innovations can still happen, and as with any technology, there will be people who try to misuse it, and you want to regulate it at that level. So that's where we think we should go on on regulation. On small nuclear reactors, modular reactors, you're absolutely right. The advances in AI require a tremendous amount of compute power, which requires a tremendous amount of energy. And we just haven't been building enough power plants in this country. And I think President Trump and his administration are really focused on making it much easier to invest and build power of all kinds in this country, and I think in the coming years, nuclear has to be a huge part of that, and the technological advances we're starting to see in small modular reactors hopefully can play an important role in the future of AI.
Joel Kaplan, thank you. Because of the American century is going to be the American millennium. We need meta, and we need power, and we need artificial intelligence to be led by the United States. Thank you for your time, Joel Kaplan. Congratulations on the new job, though I don't envy you your PR assignment today, getting out there and arguing with the world about whether it's good or bad. Thank you, Joel, for starting the day with me.
Thanks, Hugh. Great to be with you.
My phone number is 1-800-520-1234. Most people are fleeing or in their cars or out of power or forgot their devices. Don't go back. Get out. The evacuation order now covers all of northern Santa Monica. If you're listening to me on AM 870, The Answer in Los Angeles, Jennifer Horn will pick up coverage at the top of the hour, of course, but I've never seen anything like this. A firestorm that is just consuming everything in its path. And Pacific Coast Highway, there are reports at the Getty Villa, not the Getty Museum, the original Getty Museum. It's now the Getty Villa, the faithful recreation of a Roman villa. Absolutely one of the more extraordinary features of Southern California is burned down, but I haven't got that confirmed, and we won't know until the helicopters can get pictures. I'll bring you updates on the other side. Please call me at 1-800-520-1234 if you're near the fire. Los Angeles is burning if you're just waking up on the West Coast. It's pretty horrific. During the break, I went out in Orange County where Studio West is, the Relief Factor studio. And if you're watching on the Salem News Channel, we'll run some beat tape. Overnight, all you could see was disaster. There's video of Pacific Coast Highway, which is dumbfounding. I've driven that highway so many times, I just can't believe it's all burned down, but it looks like it is. We won't know for another hour until the sun comes up in California how bad it is, but there are at least 3 fires currently underway. 1,400 firefighters are on the front line, some water pressure problems. It looks like the Palisades is destroyed, but we really don't know what the firefighters are doing or how they've been communicating. And you can't really fly at night. You can't do the drops of the retardant. This started at the worst time. I am reminded, I hate to say it, of the Oakland Hills fire in Berkeley in 1991. 25 lives were lost in that. It was so fast. It was so fast. And as I said, I was just outside. I'm in middle Orange County. South of the 55, but still in the middle of Orange County, and it is blowing here. And so it's one of those days where everyone will stay on the lookout. Jerry, you're in Palisades. Do you live in? You have left, haven't you?
Yeah, I live in the Palisades, and I evacuated to Santa Barbara, and that's where I'm at right now. there's a couple things I don't understand. We were warned about this a week ago. Why is our mayor in West Africa? That's number one. Number two, yesterday, when there was a press conference, our esteemed governor said, and I quote, well, we can fight fires now with AI. I mean, can you just give me a break?
He's had a very unfortunate day, but he's never going to run for anything again. Let me ask you, did you lose your home?
I don't know. I have no idea.
Do you think you did?
I took off okay, to make a long story short, I live in the Highlands.
Okay.
And they told us to stay there. I said, forget about it. I got in my car, and look, like you and like Dwayne, we've gone through these things, right? And I said, there's no way I'm getting stuck up here. So
Smart
I just
man.
took off and went to Santa Barbara.
Smart man. I talked to my 90-year-old buddy in Mandible Canyon, which is a canyon over from where the Palisades are, and he was getting out of Dodge, too, at 3 o'clock. But there are some people, was traffic terrible leaving up the one?
No, not at that time, because soon as I heard that there was the fire, and by the way, for can you ever do any investigating on this? I know you do so many other good things. How did this fire start?
We don't know yet. There's a picture of a homeless person in a culvert, but I don't know, and I can't say that is the source. We never found the source of the Oakland Hills fire, by the way, in 1991.
And by the way, right, one last thing. Every time they do the commercials on the radio, only you can prevent wildfires, they always say 8 out of 10 are by human beings. This is just horrible.
It is horrible, and the response, it's so predictable, but it only happens every 30 years. Again, the Oakland Hills fire is the only thing I have to compare this to, and that was 30 years ago, and I think people will forget, and we'll go back to being, there's no excuse for this. There really is no excuse for this, because we live there. We live in the hills, and we're not leaving. Jerry, God bless you. Good luck. I hope your house is standing. Jim in Santa Clarita, where the second fire is. What's going on up there, Jim?
Yeah, coming down the 5 on the east side, there's several spots burning. Engines working it. The fire's down to the edge of town. The 210 freeway is closed. Unfortunately, that's an area where they just finished rebuilding the mobile home park there. It seems to be threatened again. That's all I got for you.
What is the traffic like on the 5 right now?
Well, I came through Newhall Pass, so it's fairly light this time of morning.
Yeah, well, where are you going? I mean, you're heading right into it.
I went through it. I'm going to El Segundo.
Okay. Well, safe travels. Thank you for the update. 1-800-520-1234. I wouldn't go anywhere I didn't have to go today. I really wouldn't, because it's going to go on all day long. Generally, Simo, what's the wind at the studio like, the production studio?
I'm sorry, I was typing a transcript. What were you saying?
I was asking, what is the production studio winds? I walked out during the break. And
it's sustained winds, probably about 50 miles an hour from experience, and gusts are probably in the high 80s.
And so
it's hurricane force winds, which we have.
Everyone from San Diego and Tijuana all the way up to Santa Barbara have got to keep their eyes on this. It's been a while since we've had something like this. We have them about at least once a year, and they go really good at least once a year, sometimes twice. We've had seasons where they'll go for 3-4 weeks. We'll have a day on, a couple days off, and then they're back again. But it's not unpredictable. What is unpredictable is when it starts at the edge of an urban area.
We all got on our cell phones and on weather apps that I have on my phone. We were warned that this wind event was coming 2 days ago. There is no excuse they didn't have water in Palisades.
We will get to the bottom of that tomorrow. All right, thank you, Generalissimo. Let me play for you Rick Caruso, who lost to Karen Bass in a very close mayoral race, is maybe one of the smartest guys in Southern California, but Californians are just dummies when it comes to voting. Rick Caruso was on Channel 11 last night, cut number 19.
Honest, we've got a mayor that's out of the country, and we've got a city that's burning, and there's no resources to put out fires. So if you look at your pictures, you don't see the firefighters there because there's nothing they can do. And it looks like we're in a third world country here. And we've got a lot of tough questions that we need to ask the mayor and the city council and our representatives and the county representatives. Why didn't you work to mitigate this? What was your brush mitigation program? I heard you earlier talking about it's been dry because there hasn't been rain. That's not the biggest problem here. The brush up in these hills that are controlled by the city and the county, I would bet you that if they haven't been handled, mitigated, pruned, removed for probably 30 or 40 years. This was a disaster waiting to happen. And what's predictable is preventable. And who's paying the price are all of these people in their homes and their businesses tonight. Now, we'll rebuild, but the majority of this community is going to have a tough time rebuilding their lives.
10,000 homes have been evacuated, 15,000 additional buildings also evacuated, 30,000 people are under mandatory evacuation orders in Southern California, and we're just getting started. Because I want to go back up to the warning that came out. It's a red flag warning, which is put out by the Cal Fire Service until tomorrow at 6 p.m. All right, so we have 36 hours of this ahead. The Santa Ana Mountains, including the Trabuco Range of the Cleveland National Forest, San Bernardino County Mountains, including the Mountaintop and Front County Country Ranger districts, and the San Bernardino National Forest, and the Riverside County, Coachella Valley, the Inland Empire, Orange County, Los Angeles, and San Gabriel Valley. Be just very aware. They have no idea what to do. And sure, resources are pulling. This is a big state. This is bigger than Rhode Island. And so the wind event goes from north of Los Angeles down to the Mexican border. So it's 150 miles of 50 mile an hour to 100 mile an hour winds, with 4 fires already undergoing and 36 hours to 48 hours of burning with no containment, and now water pressure failures in a number of places. More Rick Caruso, cut number 20.
But their hands have been tied, and they can't fight a fire without water and the resources that are needed. Everybody knew these winds were coming. The other question has to be, were all the things in place to try to, again, mitigate the damage here? But the real issue to me is twofold. We've had decades to go remove the brush in these hills that spread so quickly. And the second is, you got to have water. And my understanding is the reservoir was not refilled in time and in a timely manner to keep the hydrants going. So that's a failure, whether on DWP's part or another city agency. But this is basic stuff. This isn't high science here. And it's
so I want to break
leadership.
in here because the evacuation orders have extended to Glendale, where our mothership is, KRLA FM and KRLA AM and KKLA, and all of our friends at The Answer in LA, all of La Cañada, Flint Ridge, and northern Monrovia. The area under a mandatory evacuation is east of the 2 freeway. Most of Altadena is under an evacuation order. Pasadena's Hastings Ranch neighborhood, get out. The northern 2/3 of Sierra Madre, leave. Large swaths of Broadberry, parts of Duarte, and I'll continue to update. If your school's open today, I think they're knuckleheads. I'm not going to run down. It's like a snow day. We were talking about it nostalgically with Selena Zito on Monday. Snow days are nothing. Fire days are hell. And it does look like an inferno. And I really don't know how to describe to you a 99 mile per hour night winds. You don't sleep very well. The whole house is rattling. If you're in a trailer park, one of which was lost already, I don't know what you're doing. 99 miles per hour is hurricane level winds. And so you got 4 fires blowing in Southern California. That it's a nightmare scenario, and every crew will be out in the morning. If you're watching on the Salem News Channel, you are seeing what kind of a nightmare people are doing. And some folks are trapped in their houses, and they're doing phone calls, and they're posting X videos, when the smart thing to do A mandatory evacuation order means leave. The unfortunate disaster of the Palisades Village shopping center damage, the Palisades Village, it's pretty hard for me to describe. The shopping center that Rick Caruso was talking about being fully engulfed was built in 2018. It's not like these are old structures, rickety structures. We've seen some fires in the West Coast areas where older mining towns, et cetera, have gone up in flames. Not the Palisades. The Palisades and that area, it's Beverly Hills in the mountains. It's just north of Malibu. It's where the most extraordinary architectural wonders of Southern California are on display, and Malibu, of course, historic Malibu, all ablaze. Stand by, 1-800-520-1234. If you've got something to tell us, please give a call. Andrew McCarthy has called out to me, and Harley has sent to me the caption of the emergency appeal the president-elect has filed with the Supreme Court. In the Supreme Court of the United States, people of the state of New York versus Donald Trump. Application for stay of criminal proceedings in the Supreme Court of New York County, New York, pending the resolution of President Trump's interlocutory appeal on presidential immunity. And it's filed by Todd Blanche, who will be the Deputy Attorney General. What's very interesting about this, the court should grant this. This is a kangaroo court. It is an embarrassment. We have a real tragedy and real problems on the West Coast this morning. We have a disaster in Chicago schools, which are a disaster. But if you're looking on the Salem News Channel, and I really would encourage you to do so, we are showing you late-breaking video of PCH, Pacific Coast Highway. It's all burned down. And we've got jokers, I mean, literally jokers on every network who want to talk about Donald Trump and Juan Merchan, when Juan Merchan is a joke of an acting judge. Alvin Bragg is a joke. It's a joke case. It's a joke appeals court system. And the Supreme Court is very, very much like it was in 2000. They tried to let Florida's Supreme Court handle the recount. And eventually the Supreme Court had to jump in, and they jumped in, by the way, 7-2. It wasn't 5-4. 7 out of 9 justices said, Florida, you're an embarrassment, and we're stopping this circus. And they stopped it, and 5 of them said we're stopping it forever. So Bush v. Gore is a 5-4 decision, but it was 7-2 on the fact that the state was out of line. The Supreme Court should weigh in here, because this is not the rule of the law. This is a kangaroo court, and juxtaposed against a genuine crisis. And this is a big crisis in America. Like East Palestine, the people who are most immediately impacted are the ones whose homes have had to be evacuated. But it's going to be a crushing display of video come daylight out here. I'm on the West Coast. It's not morning yet, so we haven't got any scenes from above. The helicopters will get up, the tankers will get back up. But with 4 fires and hurricane force winds fueling the Eaton fire, by hurricane force, I mean, it's 99 miles an hour. Down in Orange County, it's maybe 50 to 60 miles an hour. Some gusts are bigger. The studio is rocking and rolling, and you can't hear it because of good technology, but it really is an unprecedented day. A lot of people have called 1-800-520-1234, and I appreciate, then you get blown off because a lot of power outages are going to happen today. A lot of confusion on the ground. The firefighters don't deserve any criticism. This is not, they're out there. They're on the ground, and they're throwing their life, but there aren't enough of them. And this is the worst I've seen in 25 years, maybe longer. That Oakland Hills fire in Berkeley in 1991 was the worst I've ever seen, and we're 32 years removed from that, I guess. I don't know, 1991 to 2025. It's been a long time since anyone's seen anything like this, but I am afraid it's hard to get out of these places because of pathway evolution. And I'll explain it again for the Steelers fan. You know, as soon as you develop one street, you develop the next street. So if you give a mouse a cookie, you give a moose a cookie. If you've got a toddler, you've read that book. Well, California developed that way further and further into the hills because people want to live in the hills and look at the ocean, and it's fine. The land was for sale. They bought the houses. They're insured, but they also pay for fire and water. They pay for protection, and the protection isn't there. A lot of people are going to be calling Andrew and Todd today, I'm afraid. 888-888-1172. Because they're going to have to rebuild their home. They're going to have to get a loan. A lot of these loans are going to be unusual. And a lot of these loans, everybody who works with their hands in California is going to be fully employed forever. Andrew Del Rey, Todd Avakian, you can trust them. They are in Southern California. They're in Orange County like I am. So they're not going to have any personal impact, at least not yet. It's going to be Thursday, tomorrow afternoon before the winds dry down. So I'm not going to declare victory other than those three areas because it could be much, much worse by the time I talk to you tomorrow morning. But AndrewandTodd.com are where you go. If you're one of those people who are methodically getting organized for a rebuild and you've already called Bud the contractor and found out he's retired and you're trying to find you're going to have to get your insurance proceeds. You're going to call your insurance firm, but also get in touch with AndrewandTodd.com, 888-888-1172. Open the file, open the mortgage file. It's going to be a very long time. Grieve your losses of possessions. I think it's hundreds, if not thousands of homes. And be prepared for a whack on the insurance rate, Southern California, because this is inevitable in the aftermath of this. But our friends at Andrew and Todd have been with us for many, many years. They're moving with us to the afternoons next week. We'll be able to tell everyone in the country from Key West, Florida, all the way up to Spokane, Washington, and the Canadian border from Maine to San Diego. If you're refinancing and you need to build a house, 888-888-1172, AndrewandTodd.com. Going to hand it over to Jennifer Van Horn and the team at AM 870 KRLA The Answer, and my friend Mike Gallagher across all these other stations. It's heartbreaking. It's terrible. And I'll be back tomorrow to update you on what has happened in the course of today out here in the West.